with the latest on the corporate front, all the market trends, expert opinion, and sound business advice. It is your unique window into the business world, direct from the heart of China.
Hello and welcome to Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Coming up, we will have half an hour of business news and analysis. On today's show, China is providing subsidies on personal loans to spur consumption. How significant is this step to stimulate the economy? And OpenAI releases its new chat GPT-5. What does it mean for the AI industry? And now let's begin with our top story. China is providing subsidies on personal loans to spur consumption. Starting next month, shoppers will receive a 1% interest subsidy on loans up to 50,000 yuan or $7,000. 18 national banks and 5 online lending platforms, including Tencent's WeBank and Alibaba's Alipay, are participating. The policy supports a wide range of spending, including cars, travel, education, and healthcare expenses. So how will this policy help unleash people's spending power? And what does it mean for China's economy as a whole? For more on this, join us on the line now are Professor Qu Qiang from Minzu University of China, Li Lun, Assistant Professor of Economics at Peking University, and also Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University. So I will start with you. China is providing, the subsidies on personal loans. So this is the first time the central government has introduced a fiscal policy to subsidize the interest on personal loans directly. So why is it now, and what are its key features?
Well, I think the reason is because as China pivot towards domestic consumption demand, the government has been rolling out various policies, fiscal policy, monetary policy, and other more targeted policies to stimulate consumption. And for example, the trade-in program that has been very helpful in boosting retail sales in home appliances, in electronics products, and so on and so forth. I think now the step has been taken to trying to provide some subsidies on qualified personal consumer loans. And this is qualified for various personal loans. For example, if it's a 10,000 per loan or cumulative 50,000 loans per person. Again, the aim here is trying to reduce the cost of consumer credits for the consumers, and that would help to boost some of the consumption potential and to promote domestic consumption demand. So I think it is a helpful policy, given that the Chinese households are now taking more loans to support their consumption, and this 1 percentage point reduction or subsidies on the interest is pretty much 1/3 of the average interest charged on consumer loans. So this could be a pretty significant subsidies from the consumer's point of view. I would add too that even though you see some of the headlines that says in July, China's new bank loans have contracted by 50 billion yuan, which is the first contraction since 2005. I want to say that, first of all, we know there are seasonal factors. July is typically where bank lending slows down after the peak in June when the banks are trying to achieve their half-yearly goal. And the second point is that when you look at the total social financing, it actually grew by like 9%, almost 9% in July. So it's a very healthy growth in that regard. And again, I think this is a good time for these kinds of policies to be rolled out to ease consumers' burden when it comes to taking out consumer loans. And so that would help to stimulate consumption growth.
And Professor Qu Qiang, so considering the recent government measures to reduce the kindergarten fees, increase pensions, and also the consumer goods trade-in program for almost 2 years, does this suggest a strategic shift in government policy to prioritize the consumption?
Yes. I do think this is actually a very important idea because I think all those sectors the government has been choosing is actually have several different natures. Number one, I think it's very much important concerning people's livelihood. When we're talking about healthcare, when we talk about old age caring, when we talk about the kindergarten, and that's not only about money. That's about people's feeling about safety. If you want to work to your fullest potential, if you want to go out there and try to stay with your company longer time, you will always, worry about the people at home, your parents, your children. So I think the government realized that this is something we really need to provide the safety net for them. And secondly, I think itself, it's a very important part of the consumption. For example, if you can take care of healthcare, senior citizens and children, and itself, it means a great industry. And in the past 5 years, we've been seeing that this service sector has been growing really fast. And as China has been marching towards a higher income nation, I think service sectors will absolutely become very important sector of our GDP, like what United States used to experience, Japan used to experience, European Union used to experience. That is actually very important. And also they have a very long supply chain, not only the service itself, but also concerning all kinds of manufacturing products, healthcare products, and also insurance, financial services. And also you can extend them into the tourism, culture, physical education, sports, and etc. And also, I think the third important nature is that this sector is very important to create jobs. Basically, when service sector is more than 50% of the GDP, actually every 1% up when its share in the GDP has been increased, they can increase actually more than 3% to 5% of the jobs. So I think that is going to be a very important next future, next economic growth point for the future in China. I think that's a reason why those service sectors has been chosen by the government.
And Li Lun, so 8 service industries are targeted, as Professor Qiang mentioned: the healthcare, elderly care, childcare, cultural entertainment, tourism, etc., etc. So why do you think were these sectors chosen? And do you think this could lead to a service sector investment boom?
Yeah, so I think these industries are chosen to kind of reflect a strategic shift towards a consumption-led growth model instead of a investment or manufacturing led growth model. So we see that these industries are mostly all service sectors which have high growth potential, and it could investments in these areas could yield very strong returns. It could also create a lot of jobs. And I think in the future, because the importance of this is that one person's consumption can be another person's income, which could lead to further consumptions in other areas. So this could have a multiplier effect, in terms of stimulating the consumption in all areas. And also, I think if you look at it, healthcare, elderly care, and childcare are some of the roadblocks preventing people to make other consumptions in cars or in electronics, because they worry about their own health, they worry about their elderlies or children. So if they could borrow against the future and pay these expenses using personal loans, then they could have more disposable income and more savings towards other areas of consumption. So this could further kind of release the consumption potential of these other areas. And finally, part of the interest rate subsidy policy is in the business entities in the service sector, which could mean that the bank loans for consumer-facing service businesses could also enjoy a 1% subsidy rate, which is applicable for 1 year, and they could receive subsidies for up to 1 million yuan per entity. So this, as for your question, whether this could lead to a service sector investment boom, I think it's very likely, because I think the policy is coming from two sides. From the consumer side, it basically give consumers a more subsidy on their consumption, on their interest for their personal loans, but also for suppliers of these service sector products and services, because they also allow them to enjoy a lower rate loan for their investment in the future as well.
And Professor Qiang, so some early estimates suggest that every 1 yuan in subsidies could mobilize 100 yuan in loans, potentially unlocking the huge spending power. So what do you make of that, and what does it mean for the economy as a whole?
Oh, I think this 1 to 100 kind of the leverage ratio is very optimistic. It can be reasonable. For example, like in 2023, our consumption loan services average ratio is about average rate interest rate is about 4.3%, and after the subsidy, it's basically about 3.1%. So it's very much towards the LPR. So I think towards the mid-income or lower income groups, I think this kind of interest rate can be really attractive. And that's sometimes we have seen that back in the 2023, there is a very important wave for consumptions, if you remember that, because in 2023, we have the first round of the trading policy, and that policy shows up very well. A lot of people just to trade in their mobile phones, old phones, and old cars. So that's laying the foundation for the 2024, 2025 trading policies continue and expanding the scale. And if I think this kind of a subsidy can really be implemented, and if we can have such a leverage ratio, well, I'm not talking about 1 to 100 kind of a leverage ratio. If we can do 1 to 50 times of leverage ratio or 60 times of the leverage ratio, basically its contribution to GDP can be 0.5 to 0.7%. And I think that will be very good for the Q3 and the Q4 GDP numbers, and also it can be a very good sign for the next year.
And yeah, so let's take a look at the latest economic figures. China's CPI was flat year on year in July, but core CPI rose by 0.8%. So how do you explain it? And does it suggest that domestic demand is already strengthening?
Right. And I want to say that, this is not just in July. In fact, in June, we saw the CPI rose by 0.1% year on year. And that basically reversed the 0.1% drop in the previous 3 months. So I think, we start to see the improvement in the sign, as early as June. And so July, I think it's pretty much flat in terms of the CPI, but the core CPI, as you mentioned, is has actually improved quite a bit, 0.8% year on year. And it's actually also a 0.4% growth month on month. So I do see that as a positive trend. And I think, that has to do with the fact that it's the summertime, there's a lot more service boom, travel, tourism, and all of these have been growing pretty healthily. And also, I think, positive news coming from the trade front. Despite the trade war, China's exports and trade performances remain very resilient and strong, not to mention, the trade truce is going to be extended. So I think, in a way, I think this means that the economy is likely to look even better going forward. And so I think that would definitely be helpful to stabilize, in terms of the consumer price. Now, the PPI, though, the producer price index has been, negative for months. So I think that has to do with, again, involution, some kinds of price competition, and that does require some more efforts to reverse the trend, because that would be helpful for industrial enterprises to earn positive profits and continue to have healthy growth in the production. I also want to make the correction of what I earlier said. I think it's actually, for the subsidies consumer loans, that is 50,000 yuan per loan. So it's quite substantial. And also, like you mentioned earlier, it is both the subsidy on consumer loans, but also for the service industries. So I think that the goal is very clear. We have the trade-in policies for retail sales of goods. And so now here are the subsidies for the service industries that would help, from the consumer point of view, from the demand side, but also from a supply side, that helps generate more cash flows and reduce, cost burden on the businesses. So together, I think that would really help to stimulate more services. When you look at the trade-in program, 150 billion, subsidies basically generate additional 1.3 trillion dollars yuan worth of sales. So that is 8-9 times of the ratio. So if we're thinking about on the service side, 1 yuan of the subsidies generate 100 loans. I think that is quite reasonable. So again, overall, I think all of these efforts are trying to promote more domestic demand, especially consumption demand, to stabilize prices and to also lift the confidence to grow the economy.
And Li Lun, so the services price rose big in July, particularly in travel and tourism. And this is driven by the summer demand. So what are the key drivers behind this surge in summer consumption? And what are the new trends of it?
Yeah, so I think seasonally, summer is a good time for traveling and tourism. Part of the reason is that the kids and teachers have their summer vacation, and also I mean the weather is ideal for traveling. And this summer, I think lots of people, because of the hot weather, they choose to go to cooler places and smaller cities. So I think people's travel destinations have become more diverse. So this all lead to a more kind of evenly distributed growth in the travel. So I think these reflect a rebound somehow in leisure services and domestic tourism. In a bigger scale, people are not only buying products or enjoying services locally, but they kind of shift towards experiential consumption. So basically, whether they go to other travel destinations or they kind of spend time in quality hotels, but they kind of put more focus on the travel experiences that they enjoy during the trips. So that would include, entertainment, cultural event during their travel. It could include food and restaurant services. So I think in the future, there could also be potential growth also in wellness, lifestyle sectors, and also maybe digital service platforms. So this all relate to people's higher demand towards a higher quality life, a more focus on their better experiences and quality of their life.
Well, we're speaking with Li Lun, Assistant Professor of Economics at Peking University, Professor Qu Qiang from Minzu University of China, and also Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University. And after a short break, OpenAI releases ChatGPT-5. What does it mean for the AI industry?
Welcome. I'm Elaf Elad, economics professor and member of the Data Science and AI Center at New York University, Shanghai. On the World Today program, you can find in-depth and impartial insight, as well as critical commentary on key trends in the Chinese economy, financial technology, business, and blockchain. To prepare for the world tomorrow, join me on World Today.
You're listening to Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. The 2025 World Robot Conference was held recently in Beijing, showcasing over 1,500 cutting-edge products from about 200 robotics companies worldwide. Humanoid robots are one of the highlights. And meanwhile, OpenAI has unveiled a new generation of ChatGPT, highlighting significant advancements in artificial intelligence. So Li Lun, Beijing recently hosted a globally significant conference on robotics. What innovations did the conference introduce, and how significant will they be for robotics and AI?
Yeah, so this year we're seeing the 10th World Robot Conference is held in Beijing's E-Town between August 8th to 12th. So this time is a historic event. It featured over 1,500 exhibits from around 200 robotic companies, in China and globally. So it's a 25% increase compared to 2024. So this year's the event theme is making robots smarter, making embodied agents more intelligent. So we're seeing a shift from producing individual robot modules like robot arms to a more integrated system that's ready for real world applications. So we're seeing a bunch of interesting highlights and innovations. For example, the famous Chinese startup Unitree showcase its robot boxing matches. So this draws a lot of attention and large crowds. And there's also various demonstrations for the parts and components of humanoid robots. and also the various applications from the manufacturing to household. So I think this year's World Robot Conference is really a kind of a turning point, because if last year we're only seeing some of the concepts being introduced, this year we're seeing a widespread application scenario that's being displayed in this conference.
And so, recently OpenAI releases ChatGPT-5. So what stands out to you for this GPT-5 launch, and how are they comparing to other models?
Right. So I think the Altman, the OpenAI CEO, basically said that this new GPT vision, right, 5.0, it's a major kind of improvement since they launched the ChatGPT 4.0 about 2 years ago. So it boasts faster coding skills. For example, at a demonstration, they show that within minutes, the ChatGPT 5.0 are able to write codes to have a language learning app. It would also have the choice of having, a vocal interface or interactions with the chatbots. It's able to customize voices and also colors, and it would also be able to connect to mail and calendar. And so there are all these, improvements in terms of this new model. But that said, I think there are also users who find this current model, quote unquote, lack personality. And so that also leads Sam Altman to say that they may bring back Chat 4.0 just as an option for the users. So again, there are also arguments that Altman was making that this is a significant step along the path to the so-called AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. But I think, people still have doubt about that. But that said, I think, the goal is still trying to continuously to improve these large language models towards the, so-called AGI or superintelligence.
And so the big tech companies like Amazon, Google, Meta, and Microsoft, they have all poured billions of dollars into AI since the launch of the first version of the ChatGPT. And China's DeepSeek also shook up the AI sector early this year with a model that delivers high performance using the less costly chips. So what can you tell us about the AI landscape and the investment?
Right. Well, I think it's clearly now China and the United States are both, the really the leaders in the AI industry in this landscape. But I think, both sides seem to deploy very different strategies. I think on China's part, it's aiming for, open source language models, and it's trying to develop these models at a very cost-effective way. And it's also trying to bring down the cost of deploying AI and to usher in faster deployment of AI in various applications. So humanoid robotics is one of these examples where, China is not only sharpening up the technologies, but also trying to produce these robots at a cheaper cost, at a larger scale, and to applied it in various ways in factories, in homes, in different service industries. So I think that really shows very different kinds of strategies where China acts extremely fast in production and also user case multiplication, where the United States seem to play this big money game and trying to really shoot for the so-called holy grail solution, according to some of the industrial expert. And so I think only time will tell which model, which strategy would prevail or would succeed in this AI race. But I think, again, from China's perspective, AI is meant for be more inclusive and to be more, applicable instead of, trying to build a model to the, really cutting edge, but yet without the cost effectiveness and also the open sources, it may not be able to deploy widely in a cost-effective way. So I think it would be interesting to see the kinds of race between China and the United States, which strategy would really help in the long term.
And analysts say the arrival of an AI era will transform how humans work and play, and people called for technology serving the good. So how to put it into practice, and how can those AI companies balance the pressures for profits with a commitment to long-term public benefit?
I think, like any other technologies in human history, I think AI also presents the opportunities, but also, the risks. Things like, to deal with, for example, climate change. On the one hand, AI with the technologies is promising, improving, the way we grow agriculture, the way we monitor weather, and so on and so forth. But we also know that AI is very resource intensive. So in the short term, it actually could create more environmental damages, especially, depending on where the energy is generated to power AI. Also in terms of disinformation, misinformation. And so there are definitely ways that AI needs to be governed and to be regulated. And I think that is precisely, China's approach. China has vouching for, collective governance and really trying to regulate AI to benefit the human race rather than harm it. And I think, there are some bottom line issues such as not allowing AI to be used in, for example, managing and deploying, nuclear weapons, for example. I think this is the bottom line that, China, United States, and many other countries are in agreement. But there are other potential risks, such as replacing, certain jobs. And again, I think, that really depends on whether or not policies can put in place to train people to move from different sectors to secure their jobs, and also the way to use AI to replace some of the repetitive, irksome jobs rather than take away the creative jobs and jobs that people actually enjoy doing. So I think there are a lot at stake. And again, the bottom line is to have very mindful thoughts about regulations, but also in a way collectively govern AI and make AI, inclusive to serve really the benefits rather than, being exclusive and monopolistic to enrich the corporates.
Well, we're speaking with Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University, Professor Qu Qiang from Minzu University of China, and also Li Lun, Assistant Professor of Economics at Peking University. That's all the time for this edition of Biz Today. To listen to this episode again or to find more previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching for Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening.